Hi there, welcome. I'm making this video because at the end of August, Square-Enix is releasing Visions of Mana, a game that right now has a demo that you can try on Steam and I assume on consoles, but I haven't checked, but probably, right? So this is a primer on why I think this game shows potential, and it's not even what it seems at the start of the demo, why I think it's important, and you should probably at least give that demo a try. Because let's be honest, I think Visions of Mana is going to be largely overlooked. Like, just briefly, it has a lot of things stacked against it. It was revealed at an Xbox event, which is maybe not the best event for this kind of game, but that's the partnership that they have going with Square-Enix. So a lot of people also assumed it was coming to Game Pass. It is not. It is going to be just for sale normally. It releases basically the same time as Star Wars Outlaws, which, for as much hate as is being received by that game here in our bubble, let's be honest, in the mainstream, it's probably going to sell pretty well. And even within our bubble, I think there's plenty of people who are ignoring a lot of the more outside reasons of the game or ignoring some of the terrible gameplay around it. And it'll probably be the big talk of the town and where most people are going to put their money in that week towards the end of August. So it's not looking good, but the game is looking good. I personally really like the Mana series, and this started as Final Fantasy Adventures way back when, but you've probably heard of Secret of Mana, or Trials of Mana, or Dawn of Mana. It's a series that Square-Enix has had for a while that uses a art style honestly very similar to the current one, that's focused on more of a light RPG experience with some very kooky and interesting world building, but the big thing that sets it apart is its combat system, which is real-time, a 3D action combat system. If you've ever been a fan of the Tales of series, for example, I think that's a good analog. Think of this as the Tales of from Square-Enix, but they haven't made as many of them. Although a game like Tales of Arise, which had a very striking art style that was very appealing to, I think, a very wide audience, Visions of Mana is going for a slightly more cartoonish and Saturday morning type of vibe to it. Not just in its aesthetics, but also in its tone, and that is actually one of the things I like the most about it. So I'd say the demo is about an hour and a half if you go and do some of the side quests or explore a little bit more of the combat, and it doesn't make the best first impression depending on what you're expecting. The start of it is basically a hallway in which you're introduced to some of the gimmicks that feel a little bit Nintendo platformer-ish. You can slow down time to freeze things and be able to platform better. You have these little collectibles, this syrup that is all over the place that they want you to jump around and collect, and that makes it feel very playful just to start with. And then once you get out into the first big open area, you start to see what the game is really more about. And I think that there's a lot of stuff here that people could view as not very good, especially newer gamers that are not as familiar with some of the structures of RPGs from days gone by. I can honestly, and this is something very sad for me to say, imagine a lot of people comparing this to Genshin. That's kind of a fever in gaming in general, is just comparing everything to Genshin Impact for some reason. Because you have a slightly open world, you have a little bit of an emphasis on platforming and navigating the environment, and then you reach a place and you fight different enemies in slightly basic combat, especially at the start, and especially with the overworld monsters. It's very simple, and you have 3 different characters that you can swap between at any moment, and each of those 3 characters has a different element assigned to them, and the enemies can be weak or resistant against that element. So, yeah, I unfortunately, I can see those comparisons coming, but no, please stop, please. However, as you play, you're also going to notice that this is just a very classic RPG in many ways, and a very cozy one for me at that, and that's something that Square-Enix has been doing for a while, and I think they haven't really been properly rewarded for it. Octopath Traveler 2, for example, is one of my favorite games of recent times, and not enough people played it. But Square has been committed to keeping that old school RPG flavor alive, and Visions of Mana is definitely in that same vein. But it takes a while, even within that demo, to start appreciating what it's trying to do in the way that the characters level up, and you get equipment, and you slowly piece together how the spell system works, because it's actually quite complicated and very cool. During the demo, you have 3 party members available, and you can switch which element they have associated to them. These guys are alms, which in the story is basically like gatekeepers of elements. They channel certain elements. They're very important figures within the lore of this world, and you can switch which element they have equipped, which will allow you to switch their class, which is basically which main weapon and costume they're using. But They also get to keep their spells that are more unique to them in each of their different trees, so that you can combine the action movesets with the spells in order to do some cool different combos and prepare cool combat scenarios. Now, this is one of the problems with the demo, is that I feel like the depth of that combat is not really put forth, and for the people looking for a bit more depth and to see exactly how flexible or how interesting the RPG and combat systems marry together, that isn't really shown. Once you get to town at the end of the demo, they do let you purchase new weapons, and that did immediately make me think, wait, so there's a bunch of different weapon classes and movesets with their own unique things for each of the characters. So depending on which element is assigned to a character, you can unlock the ability for them to use different weapons that are completely different within each other. So for example, Mortreya, the cat ear dude, instead of using his 2 daggers like a rogue, he can also use a katana and just go full Virgil. Just straight up full Virgil. Or Karina, which in the demo starts off with a naginata, I believe. She can also use fans, and she can also just use her fists, which is obviously the best thing. Oh, like, come on. But progressing through each of the different elemental trees for each of the characters will also unlock new spells and new passives and new things for them. Additionally, each of the different weapons that you get to test in the demo have different quirks to them. So for example, with the katana, you can do dodge canceling to keep combos going. Or, and if I'm not mistaken, Karina with the fans has a different attack if you hold down the button. And those are very unique to those weapons, but they are slightly more advanced action combat type of things. The main protagonist, Val, can equip a lance and a shield that has a guard point on its heavy attack. There's some depth going on here, and I'm very curious to see how much more that will go, because obviously this is just a very small slice of the game, and probably I would like to think that later on some of these mechanics get deeper, some of the combos and the ways that you chain different things gets more and more complex. But the fact that there are these more interesting wrinkles to the combat depending on which class you have equipped is very encouraging. But the main focus is to combine all of those different combat elements with your different spells and the different systems that are functioning in the game in order to have a pretty cool combat experience, all wrapped within a very, let's say, enjoyable, very pleasant RPG story. I said before, there's a lot of Saturday morning cartoon energy here, and I think you're going to notice that very quickly. There's some interesting localization choices. Dragon Girl being a kind of stereotypical Southern girl I thought it was weird, but honestly, kind of fits. I don't know. I found it entertaining.
I was in trouble back there.
Come again?
I said, thanks everyone! Jeez.
But the vibes are generally very cute and very cozy. I don't know how deep or dark the game might get later on, but it felt like you're just embarking on a very classic adventure. If I had to place it with something a little bit more contemporary, I would say that it feels like Dragon Quest XI light, like less serious than that, which the start of Dragon Quest XI is not the most serious thing to begin with, but I hope that kind of gets the point across. But it just feels like something that I want to sink my teeth into and just relax and forget about a lot of the more serious things in the world and just enjoy a classic RPG with some interesting combat. And with enough mechanics for me to really sink my teeth into it despite that vibe. Like, I know very well that a lot of people don't like the stereotypical progression of an RPG, but honestly, I'm not tired of it. I think we've come back around to it being a bit of a comfort food. I do want to save the world and then eventually fight God. That sounds good to me, I'll be honest. Now, the biggest shame for me is that while the little open areas that you get to explore and test the combat out in is fun, and the little cutscenes that play and the story that happens when you're in the only town that is in the demo is interesting, the best part of it comes at the end in one of the standouts of every single Mana game, which is the boss fights, because it's where for, 5, 10, maybe even 15 minutes, you get to really engage with every part of the combat system in order to overcome these bosses. Out in the open field, combat can devolve into going to an enemy, pressing 3 buttons, and the combat is over, which, hey, some people really enjoy that, but the real meat and potatoes of it is encountering these fights that are much longer, that have different mechanics, very akin to something you might see in an MMO and really flexing how much you understand the combat system there to get big damage and combos going. And you get one of those at the end of the demo that I found to be highly enjoyable and really the moment where it solidified for me that I would really like to play this game. Spoilers, if I do play it and I do review it or do anything with it, it'll probably be late, because at the end of the day, for a channel like mine, the opportunity to review Star Wars Outlaws is a big deal. So I guess at some point this video is me trying to make up for that, because if I do end up sinking, 120 hours of production into stuff related to Star Wars Outlaws and don't into Visions of Mana, at least I put this video out to hopefully get it on more people's radars. Now, obviously, we don't know what the future holds for this kind of game, and I want to be cautiously optimistic. Really, from the demo and from some of the promotional material we've seen, and now actually having played the game, it feels like it's probably going to be a pretty solid 8 out of 10 type of game, depending on the taste of a reviewer, maybe a 7 out of 10, or maybe a 9 out of 10. But at the same time, a lot of people didn't have their hopes up for something like Octopath Traveler 2, and that game is incredible. So, could be amazing. But I say that so you have your expectations in check, and really check it out with that expectation of this is probably just going to be a fun game that offers me a really good time, especially if you like some of that classic JRPG goodness, but of the action variety. I might be wrong, but I especially think that within my audience, a lot of you guys will appreciate what this game is putting forward. So yeah, give that demo a shot. If you're new here, make sure to check out the channel. I do a ton of different things, and maybe even consider subscribing. Also, make sure to hit the like button, because that helps this video reach more people, which in the case of this video is the only reason I'm making it, is that more people should be informed that Visions of Mana looks pretty damn cool. Thank you to the patrons up on the patron wall as usual, and as always, I'll see you again very soon.